So, good morning and welcome. The power of integrity. And today we have a wonderful guest, Ric Franzi, a longtime friend and colleague of mine. In fact, Ric has a show called Critical Mass. It's the longest running business show in Orange County. And Ric is a wonderful individual, a delightful man, and I'm proud to call him my friend and I'm proud to call him my colleague. Ric, I'd love to just turn it over to you and let you tell our audience a little bit about your world, what you're doing, what's going on. There's always a lot of wonderful things, but you have a beautiful pedigree of history, and I think our audience ought to know about that first.
Well, thanks for the invitation to be on your show, Ralph. This is a privilege, the Power of Integrity podcast. Love it. And I think of my career in two chapters. The first chapter was all about working for Fortune 100 companies and learning and going to school. And there's a real opportunity when you work for large companies to invest in yourself because if you want to, there are programs that they offer. And you learn through osmosis as well because there are a lot of successful, smart people in large companies. I'd always wanted to feel like I was the boss, and I was lucky enough in my career to become the president general manager of a business unit. And once I'd achieved that level of success, I recognized that I still had a boss because it was a division, and that I'd sort of done and it's run its course. And that's when that entrepreneurial itch that I've always had, because when my wife and I were first married on our honeymoon, we wrote out our life plan. And part of my contribution to it was that someday I was going to own my own business. But Ralph, I never found the thing that was good enough to give the corporate career up for until later in my life. I was 49 years old and I had achieved being the president general manager of that operating division. I was in a CEO peer group for manufacturing companies and had an epiphany one day. We were in Santa Barbara at a retreat. You know, Santa Barbara's beautiful. It was a beautiful day. And this
Yes.
thought came through my mind. I'd rather do what that guy's doing, Bob Graybill, than go back and run this company that I'm running. I went home, talked to my wife. She said it makes perfect sense. Told my boss at the time that I was leaving. It took them about 6 months to find my replacement. And during that time, I sort of got my legs under me a little bit as an entrepreneur. And since 2007, I've been building what I call CEO peer groups for SMB business owners and entrepreneurs here in Orange County, California. As you mentioned, I do my podcast. I've written a couple books. That's my business career in a nutshell.
And Ric, it's been said, and I'm sure this resonates with you, that entrepreneurs are the only folks that will work 80 hours a week in order to never work 40 hours a week.
Yes, I never worked so hard for so little money than when I started my. It's the hardest thing to do in business is to create a business.
Yes.
Business is never easy, and being a CEO and leader is it's always with its challenges. But creating something from nothing in the business world is daunting.
Yes. Yeah. And you're helping a lot of folks continue to grow their organizations and build them. But the launching of something in a startup, the white water that you go through and the chop it's tremendous. It's a lot of headwinds and
Well,
so
you
many things to learn.
and you knew that when you built your practice, right?
Yeah.
It's being an employee has its drawbacks and challenges, and being an entrepreneur where you bet on yourself brings a whole other level of responsibility, and it requires, I think, more of your person to be successful, which is why I love this podcast talking about integrity and being an entrepreneur and a business leader. So
Yeah, and speaking of integrity, Ric, with the show's main emphasis is about integrity. There's got to be moments both in the startup and through the journey with all the folks that you have talked to that are business leaders here in Orange County and even beyond those borders. Tell us something about where integrity played a role. You saw a powerful role that it played in your own personal journey and experience, both either in business or personally. And I think our audience would be really interested to hear that.
Uh, okay. As you ask me that question, an experience pops to mind, and It happened to me at the turn of the century. Makes me feel old to say that, but it was 1999, and frankly, that was the turn of the century. A company that I had worked for 15 years. The division that I was the VP of global sales for was sold to our largest competitor. And frankly, we as an executive team thought we might be able to buy it from the company because we knew we weren't strategic and they were going to divest. And we thought maybe we had a chance to buy it. And they informed us that they decided, the corporate executives and the board, that it was in best interest of the employees to sell it to a competitor whom which we fought every day against. I mean, we defined ourselves based on who we were because we weren't them. And so I was whisked on a plane to Santa Clara, and maybe it was San Jose, at the Admirals Club at the San Jose airport. And the president of the division and myself were the only two that went down there. And we went with the CEO and the CFO of our competitor. And as we were going through this situation and what was going to happen, I'm Italian, I have a lot of emotion, and I just couldn't bite my tongue any longer. And I went through this whole thing that I just sort of said, we define ourselves by who we are, by who you are. We're not you. I don't know how this is ever going to work. And I just laid it all out. I was totally transparent and frankly, completely honest with them. I left that meeting, and when I got back to Portland, Oregon, which is where we were at the time, I told my wife when I got home, I think I just got myself fired because I just spoke my truth to these people who don't know me really. And I come to find out a couple days later that in fact, they wanted to offer me to be the vice president for global sales for what would become the combined company because they really liked my energy, my passion, and I guess my integrity and honesty, which was not what I had expected, to be honest. I really thought I'd have to get my resume ready for a new job.
Hmm. That had to be some trying hours between the time you decided to lay it on the line and the time that they decide to pick that up.
You should have seen what my president, he was looking at me like, what are you, dude? What are you doing here? So,
That had to be interesting times. Is there a time, flip that on its head,
okay.
where not necessarily you were involved with the dishing out of the lack of integrity, but where you experienced that lack of integrity and how the house of cards crumbled under the weight when the lack of integrity showed itself? There's not always a lot of instances in our lives because we surround ourselves as time goes on by people of integrity, but I'm sure there's been somewhere along the way where you caught a glimpse of where someone decided or just didn't act with the course of integrity, and it ultimately came back to haunt them.
Yes. One in coaching the business owners that I work with here in Orange County, one of the messages that I deliver to them, in my opinion, they are oversampled by their employees. Their employees are watching them to understand. Basically, at the end of the day, am I an employee going to be okay? Is the company okay? Is the boss okay? Are we okay? And they see behaviors and they decide based on what they observe the boss doing what's going on. And when your actions do not match your words, people believe your actions. No matter how articulate you are or how smart you think you are as a leader, when you are not being truthful, it resonates with the employees. There was a time when I was at my last corporate job when I was back with my boss and his boss, because everybody has a boss in the corporate world. And we were in a private meeting where the big boss was explaining to everyone a view that they had around their employees. He wanted to make the salary line of the company a variable expense. We need to be able to flex the employee salaries and the payments based on the needs of the business. But on the other side, there was a lot of words about how valuable employees were and all this stuff. And I spoke myself again into the situation by questioning my boss's boss, who runs at that time, a $6 billion business. That, do you not think that they know this is what the reality of our view on employees is that we're fungible, that we can flex that expense as we need to? And do you think that impacts the engagement of the employees and somewhat the cynicism that employees would have about leadership, knowing they didn't view them as really an important aspect of the business? And so that didn't get me in trouble necessarily with the organization, but it also didn't land like I had hoped. It didn't create any sense of, well, maybe we should rethink it, because at the end of the day, what the boss's boss says goes in an organization. We
Yeah.
follow that.
Well, Rick, you hit on something. The definition of integrity, folks' common words are honesty, transparency, but you hit on something, I would say consistency. Consistency, right? And consistent between walking our walk and talking a talk, and making sure that our walk follows that talk and our talk follows that walk. It's really key and crucial, right? We are being sampled every day, oversampled, as you said, by those that are employees. I don't know if you remember that book, Put Employees First. I think that was the title of it, or Putting Your Employees First. And you first read that and you think, well, boy, I thought the customer or the client was supposed to be put first. And this book took that notion and put it on its head and said, if you want your customers and clients to be elevated, you need to elevate that experience for your own employees, who are first line folks touching those customers and clients every day. How true that is.
I believe the number one competitive advantage any organization can have, whether it's for profit, nonprofit, whatever it might be, educational, is an engaged workforce. Because it's the hardest competitive advantage for your competitors to copy, because they can take
Yes.
your website, they can grab your logo, they can take your slogan, they can whatever, but to really have, and customers notice when they encounter an engaged employee, because it's not common anymore, unfortunately, in many
Yeah.
industries. But to have an engaged workforce, you have to be, as a leader, giving them reasons to believe in you and to trust you. And that leads from consistent behavior and performance. You talked about employees being number one. I have seen over the arc of my coaching career a number of my members who have exited their business. And one of our members left and turned his company into an ESOP, which is an employee-owned organization. And I have become a raving fan, when for the right type of company in the right industry, etc., to look at exiting their business through the stock sale to the employees, who are your longest term stakeholders, and
Yes.
really creating a company where the employees are a fractional owner of what the founder was able to create over the years of working together with them.
It certainly gives the employees skin in the game. Yeah, to have that ownership. Really an interesting aspect, and we don't see it used enough. It's a shame. It's a wonderful tool for finding a market of buyers, ready made, pretty much, who already have the conviction about the organization, or could even elevate their conviction with that employee ownership. And interesting. I'm glad to hear you're seeing that, because we don't see enough of that. Well, tell me, Rick, how do you think integrity plays a role with leadership in terms of fostering team performances? Um, how do you see that thread woven in the fabric of the organizations you're working with and seeing uh, in your world?
Uh, I think employee engagement, which builds on trust, which comes from integrity, which is based on consistent actions and actions matching words, and all that, works against scale. So, larger your organization, the harder it is to maintain that integrity, because the filters that the leadership message goes through gets changed and changed and changed. And so, for SMBs and early stage companies, it is a real opportunity to be able to create a congruent organization, because in a middle market company, the business owner or CEO she knows every employee, probably knows a lot of their family. There's a there's a relationship that can be established that when you have 1,000 employees or 10,000 employees, it's just impossible to expect. And so, one of the areas that I focus on with my members of the ref community here in Orange County is really focusing on the next level of management, of finding people who share your core values, who will show up as you when you're not in the room. Not that they're a mini me or a copy of you, but they believe the same things that you believe. They act and will make decisions when you're not around, like they would make when you are around. Not because they fear making a decision different than you, but because their internal values and the things that they believe in are congruent with what you believe in. And that's how you embed culture inside of a company that is better and bigger than what any individual leader could ever hope to establish by himself or herself.
Yeah, I think that word alignment, right? Internal alignment with those value systems and having employees that are consistent with that. Again, that come back to consistency. Rick, we've talked a lot about integrity in business. Any examples in your world that we can share with the audience where integrity had played a key role in your personal world?
Well, relationships are hard. And as we get some tread off the tire, people change. And when you see, let me depersonalize this. I'm sure we've all had an experience where we thought we knew someone well, and we get a glimpse at seeing them in a situation, or we hear about a situation where their behavior is incongruent with what we believe them to be. And then we have to test that. And when that happens and we realize that the person we thought they were isn't in fact who they were, it was an image that they wanted to portray, it not only affected me on how I viewed my friend, it made me think about myself, because I drank the Kool-Aid. I believed this person was the person they wanted me to believe they were. And so not only did it cause me to lose my faith and, frankly, my relationship in that person, but I started to look at other people who didn't deserve to be questioned, because I thought, well, if that person could fool me, what about you? Well, because I'm a high I as a disc and a disc high I. We're very trusting. We're people oriented. We always have the best intentions of other people, and it really it set me back a little bit, retreated a little bit from even family to some degree, thinking maybe the closer they are, the more they can fool me because of my disc style and my trust in them. And so, I think as a parent in this day and age, being a parent has never been easy, but with technology, social influence, and all that is going on in the world today for young people in Southern California, especially, because this is a very competitive and somewhat showy place to be here in Southern California, it's harder and harder for parents to raise their children in the image that they would like them to be. But I think it starts with a foundation of values, beliefs, and teaching those to your children, modeling them as a parent, holding yourself to that standard always in their eyes, and making sure that they too follow in your footsteps, if that's what you believe is the right thing to do for your kids and your family moving forward.
Yeah. Interesting. I had the epiphany that as much parenting in terms of the time and quality that we put in with our children, that social media probably puts in a lot more time than we ever have. And that at best we get to put some guardrails around by anchoring some values for them to establish themselves on how they're seeing what's coming through their filter in that social media. Because if we spend an hour of intense time with a child, how many hours are they spending on their social media? And who's really parenting these children at the end of the day with the pace in which we're moving today? It's amazing.
There's a book that I on my summer reading list that I read called The Anxious Generation. The Anxious Generation. Jonathan Haidt is the author, and it is research into the effect that, frankly, technology and the smartphone in particular has had on youth and the brain development, and how his. I recommend the book. The major thing I took away from that was that there's becoming a realization about the damage that too much screen time is doing for young people
Yes.
whose brains aren't ready for it. Schools are now starting to ban having phones on campus, and it's a big issue. But what his premise was, which I think is what I remembered from it, is that he believes that in the future we will look at screen time the way today we look at smoking. Because for a long time, doctors smoked. You go into doctors, I mean, smoking was
Right.
cool. But
Yes.
now it's not seen that way. Because we recognize the health risks potentially with smoking. And
Yes.
his belief is that the realization will come that screen time is as damaging potentially psychologically as smoking can be physically.
Yeah. Well, Rick, I mean, you've been a wealth of information and you've shared candidly with us and honestly with us, just as I expected you would. As we kind of close a little bit here, could you tell the young entrepreneurs that are listening the role of integrity and how they ought to apply it or think about applying it as they grow up in business, whether they work for someone else or whether they launch their own organization or whether they're just in a relationship with a partner and they're trying to develop the right core fabric for that value of integrity? And how would you help them understand how to weave that into their world?
Yeah, I think integrity could be thought of as the quality of being honest and kind of having strong principles. I read that somewhere in a book one time, which I think it's called Integrity at Work, which I recommend if people haven't read it. Uh, it, it
Appreciate the plug.
it's truthful. It's what we want to talk about earlier, Ralph, which is the beauty of being an entrepreneur, especially if you're starting a business, is you can put your whole self into the business. I mean, you really have a chance to create a business that is you, your values, your beliefs, your attitudes, and you should do that. Because I've interviewed quite a number of people over the years, and what I've realized, Ralph, is there's no one way to be a successful entrepreneur except to be a passionate person and to put your whole self into the business. Because, like we talked earlier, starting a business is the hardest thing to do in business. It takes all of you. And if you're not willing to put your whole self into your business in those early stages, you shouldn't even start. I think that's why so many don't succeed, because the demands are just so great for so many. I'm going to go back and get a job. It's easier than this. But once you build something that has the potential to scale, remain true to yourself. Don't believe your press clippings. What happened in the past was partly your responsibility, but it was probably equally others who have helped you along the way. Remain humble,
Said well.
recognize that tomorrow requires a different version of you than today, and don't allow the hubris of your success to take what was the uniqueness of what you started away from you. Do what you say you're going to do. Stay with your belief system. Hey, we evolve as people. We change. That's expected. Life puts us in positions where we can become a little different person. But don't ever walk away from the fact that the number one thing you need from your employees is engagement from the marketplace, from your customers, from your investors. And that starts with trusting you. And if you're not who you say you are, people will figure out who you really are. And you need to make sure they trust in you as their leader, to continue to take that hill and grow your organization.
Rick, what a crackerjack way to kind of wrap this up. These pearls of wisdom that just flowed off your tongue, they were marvelous. Boy, folks just took one or two of those delightful nuggets and acted on them. They'd be well served. Rick, you've been a delightful guest. If folks want to get in touch with you, they want to learn more about your CEO peer groups or anything else going on, or maybe be a guest in future Critical Mass show, how do they get in touch with you?
Thank you for that opportunity. The best way to find me is on LinkedIn. I'm Ric, R-I-C, Franzi, F-R-A-N-Z-I. I'm open to connect with people. And if you're an Orange County entrepreneur or business leader, or you run a nonprofit and you have a story that you'd like to tell, the best way to engage with me is let's start with having you a guest on the program. Be happy to do that. And Ralph, I knew the challenge of today was to rise to your level of consciousness and awareness. And I hope in some small way I got into the neighborhood with you.
Oh my gosh, you hit it out of the park, Rick. It was a delight. Spending time with you is always a delight. Let's make sure we catch up soon.
Okay,
I really appreciate you so much, Rick. Thank you much. And our audience, I'm sure, appreciated every pearl of wisdom you left them today. Thank you.
The information presented in this program is provided for informational purposes only. The information is believed to be reliable, but no guarantee of accuracy is made or implied. Expressions of opinions are as of this date and are subject to change without notice. The information in this material is not intended as tax or legal advice. Please consult a legal or tax professional for specific information regarding your individual situation. This information does not constitute a solicitation or an offer to buy or sell any security. Investing involves risks, including possible loss of capital. Ralph Adamo is registered with the securities and are offered through Kovac Securities, Inc., member FINRA, SIPC, 6451 North Federal Highway, Suite 1201, Fort Lauderdale, Florida, 33308. Telephone number 954-782-4771. Investment advisory services are offered through Kovac Advisors, Inc. Integrity Wealth Management is not affiliated with Kovac Securities, Inc. or Kovac Advisors, Inc.